started. And then as people filter in, they can, I guess, filter into some of the back seats. So last week we talked about, or the first couple of weeks I should say, we talked about a lot of the foundations for parenting. We talked about yourself first as an example. Parenting starts with the parent. It starts with the example that the parent sets in their life. Are you committed to Christ? Because you can't really raise a child that's committed to Christ if you aren't that committed to Christ. And their commitment is only going to go as far as your commitment. And then last week we talked about the importance of a healthy marriage and a stable marriage. And I talked about how, like the earthquake, that started, the tsunamis, it started with an earthquake that was 100 miles away in the Indian Ocean. And in the same way, it may seem like your marriage doesn't have a whole lot to do with your raising your teenager, but it does. And your teenagers take note of that. And even though it may not seem like it has a lot of immediate effect, it has a lot of effect on the godliness of your teenager. Whether or not you have a godly marriage determines whether or not you have godly teenagers in most cases. It's very difficult to raise godly teenagers if your marriage is not healthy and it's not Christ-like and it's not God-honoring. So we talked about 5 things that really help your marriage, and five ways in which you can tell if which your marriage is a godly marriage. There's a commitment to Christ. There is the ability, the self-denial. Is your main goal serving your partner, or is it serving yourself? Ability to forgive grievances, ability to forgive wrongs of your spouse. We also talked about the ability to manage conflict. And there's a difference between a conflict and a fight. Every conflict doesn't have to turn into a fight. And I mentioned a bunch of various conflicts that we go through, and not every conflict has to turn into a fight. I mentioned all the things that we could possibly go through. ER visits, kids doing things that will cost a lot of money, or doing things to embarrass you. A number of things will happen in your family over the next year. And I mentioned, of all the things I mentioned, at least 5 of them are going to happen in the next year. And 5 is if you're really blessed. But those conflicts don't have to turn into fights. They turn into fights because they're mismanaged, and both spouses, they don't handle the conflict correctly, and so it gets worse. But do you seek to resolve the situation, or do you seek blame? Do you seek who to blame? Are you trying to make the problem better, or do you make the problem worse because you're trying to be right? Is the most important thing to be right, or is the most important thing to have the problem solved? Is the most important thing to keep score of who is wronging who, or who is being wrong, or who is being right? Or is the most important thing to seek the most godly solution to the situation? So that's what we talked about last week. So now we're going to get more into the parenting part of it, or at least the direct parenting part of it. So we're going to start today with how to share your faith with your teenager, which is a topic probably of interest to all these topics are, but this one especially is a topic of interest to a lot of you. So let's start in a word of prayer, and then we'll start the lesson. Dear Lord, thank you for this time to come together today. I pray for this lesson. I pray for the parents that have come here today learning more about you and wanting to learn what it means to be a follower of Christ, and learning how to teach students how to follow Christ. I pray that your words would be the words that are heard here, that are taught here, and that the parents would be able to learn what it means to be a godly follower of Jesus Christ, and how to teach teens how to be a godly follower of Jesus Christ. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. So, Ephesians chapter. I don't. Well, I don't have that. I think it's in my office upstairs, if you know how to get in there. Well, actually, I don't know. Maybe I left it home. Okay. Okay, next week, yeah. So, there are 2 scriptures I want to start with. One is from Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. And the other one is Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. People want to read the translated version? Yeah. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4. In English, it says, "Fathers, do not embitter your children Instead, bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Do you want to read it?
我所书第6章第4节，你们做父亲的不要惹儿女的心，只要照着主的教训和警戒养育他们。
Okay. And then the next one is in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. So this is Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. So I'm going to read the English version. And this is probably one of the most often quoted verses in parenting. It says, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it.
诗篇22章第6节，教养孩童使他走到正道。使他走当行的道，就是到老他也不偏离。箴言22章第6节。
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, here's a question, a trivia question. Proverbs was written during the time of Jewish culture, obviously, Hebrew culture. Do you know when, in that culture, when they considered someone to be a grown man? What age? 13. Yeah. 13. So, here's where that verse breaks down. Because for most of you in this room, you're taking this class because you have children that are 13 or older. So it says, train a child in the way he should go. And then when he's old, he will not depart from it. Well, by the time, Jewish culture, that meant someone who was 12 or younger. So someone who's 13 or older, well, they're considered to be a man. They're considered to be a young man. So it's a little bit different in terms of how you actually apply that verse. So how do we actually train people? I mean, those of you who are 11 or 12-year-olds, 6th and 7th graders, maybe you could still work. But for those of you who have 7th, 8th graders and high schoolers, well, this verse doesn't apply because you're talking about a grown man. You're talking about someone who is considered to be a fully grown adult. So how do we share our faith with teenagers? How do we train teenagers in the way we should go? Train people who, in the time that this book was written, were considered to be young men and young women. So this is where it gets to be a little tricky in terms of learning how to parent teenagers. So the first thing I want to do, I'm going to tell you all to do. I'm going to pass around. Can I have some volunteers to pass around these sheets here? Thank you very much. So, my apologies. I didn't translate this. This is in English. So, if you need a translated version, then you can definitely email me afterwards. This is over, and email me and let me know. But this is called the Rainbow Spectrum. This is called the Rainbow Spectrum. So I shared this. Hopefully there's enough. It's hard to gauge how many people actually show up. But I don't know if there are enough. Does everybody get one? Okay. Hopefully I made enough for everybody. Okay. The attendance sheet is going around too. Okay, great. Okay, good. Everybody has one. I made enough. Okay, I was unsure exactly how many would show up. But this is called the Rainbow Spectrum. So I did this with the counselors, and then I adjusted this for parents. So it's a little bit different than it was for the counselors, but this is the way it is for parents. So this is a little bit of a spin-off of Simply Youth Ministry, 6 types of kids in youth ministry. But I adjusted it a lot for this context and for parents as well. So there's in most every youth ministry there's 6 types of kids, and they are all on this. I call it rainbow spectrum because it's the colors of the rainbow. So it makes it easier for you to be able to understand it, for you to be able to determine which types of kids are. So your assignment is to, over the next week, couple weeks, to really investigate where does my child, where does my teenager fall on the spectrum? Really honestly assess this. Really honestly take some time to think, where exactly are they on the spectrum? So I'm going to go through all 6 of the types of students that are on the spectrum over the next few minutes here. So the first one in the red is turned off. So these are students that they're turned off. Active disinterest. They're burned by experience or church or hypocrisy. They've seen some things, and cause them to distrust adults. They often have a lack of belief in the Bible, so they don't believe a lot of the main things about Christianity, and they're often entrenched in church or religious stereotypes. So they think that all church people are hypocrites. They think that all adults are hypocrites. They don't get it. They don't understand. And they oftentimes will start discussions in Bible study groups, but not because they want to have questions answered. They want to try to find ways to trap people and to disprove the faith. And oftentimes they can be socially deficient. They can be shy or awkward, or they can just they're not happy people. And then often they're in church by direct force. This is the child that you have to really talk them into going to church. Okay? You really have to have a good discussion, and oftentimes there are discussions you have to have with them about why you need to go. Or you just say, you just need to go. Right? And so how do you approach them? Pray, pray, pray. Well, pray is for how to approach, pray is in all of these. You got to pray for all these kids, no matter where they are on the spectrum. Provide more comfortable environments for interaction. Don't make every interaction, or try to find environments in which they feel more comfortable just talking with you about anything. Invest in activities they participate in. If your work schedule becomes difficult for you to engage in a lot of their activities, and this is the kind of student that you have, maybe you should try to adjust your work schedule to find ways to engage more in their life. Because that may be one of the reasons why they feel that level of animosity towards you. It's because they feel like you are not investing enough in their life. Learn about their anger towards church in a non-confrontational manner. So why don't you like church? Well, that's not what you should do. Find ways to ask them about it that aren't as confrontational. So I noticed that, oftentimes when they have a prayer, you don't bow your head and close your eyes. Is there anything in particular that you believe about prayer that you may want to talk about? I just want to learn more about what your stance is toward these things. Build trust. That's the biggest thing. The trust is the reason why they have the problems that they do. So you want to make sure that you build trust to them. You obviously want your kids to trust you, but as a parent, it's important to build trust among your teenagers so that they'll trust you and give you answers that are honest so that you understand where they are. Be patient. This is not going to turn around overnight. And don't be like negative Christian stereotypes. If they feel that you're out of touch, you don't get it, you're just hypocritical and judgmental, do whatever you can to show your teenager that I'm not like that. Don't compromise your faith, obviously, but do whatever you can to make sure that you communicate to your child, I'm not like a lot of these people that you think are hypocritical or they're judgmental or they're out of touch with the youth. So that's how you should approach them. What not to do. Expect behavior beyond basic rules and code and conduct in church. So expect them to behave, expect them to be respectful of authority and not to interrupt. But don't expect them to volunteer for a service project. Because they want nothing to do with church. Do things, rather on purpose or by accident, to highlight an anti-church stance. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you're having, it's Christmas times. How many of you are having family come in town for Christmas? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you are traveling to see family for Christmas? Raise your hand. Okay, well, when you go to see the family, maybe you, at the Christmas meal, you may say a blessing, say grace. Don't ask that teen to say the grace in front of them. They'll be like, can you say the grace, please? I don't want to say the grace. I'm against everything related to that. That's going to make them more against the church by doing that. You don't want to highlight in front of everybody that they don't like something that they don't like to do or they're against. Because oftentimes they're against it because of beliefs, they're against it because of stereotypes. Those are their reasons, and a lot of times they make those reasons known. The next one is a little bit more difficult to figure out. And this is the apathetic kid. So there's the turned off kid, which is, I don't like church at all. Then there's the apathetic kid. And this is passive disinterest. So they're often in church by indirect force. Meaning that they won't challenge you. They'll just do it because they know it's not worth it to argue with you. So they'll just go on. They won't challenge you at all. So they go because their family is Christian and they're just trying to be ethical or good. They're often quiet when they come to church. They're reluctant to socialize with other people. and they're reluctant to engage or disclose information. They don't really believe, but they don't want to tell you they don't believe because they don't want an argument. They don't want you to judge them. They don't want to be the outsider in the family. So they may claim faith to keep from being an outcast. So they'll tell you, I'm a Christian, but they don't really believe it, and they don't want you to ask them anything else besides that. So they tell you they are a Christian because they don't want you to think that they're not, because they're afraid of the implications and consequences of what would happen if you find out that they're not Christian, or if you ask them questions to reveal more of what they know about their faith and they don't have answers. They don't. So they'll just say, I'm a Christian. And this can also be kids that they may actually believe, but they don't want to be in this church. Maybe a friend invited them to another church where the youth group and the kids they felt were nicer. They were nicer to them. They don't feel that way here at CBC. Maybe the kids were invited to another church and that church had more bells and whistles. They had more attractive things in their church. They had more entertainment. They had more. They had Xboxes. They had other things that made the youth group experience much more enjoyable, and they want to go there. And when you keep telling them they got to come here because this is where you go, they don't want that. But they're not going to fight you hard. They just go because they know it's not worth it to fight. So how do you approach them? Pray, obviously. Provide more comfortable environments for interaction. Try to make the interaction a little bit as comfortable as possible. Not that you're trying to compromise, but try to make the environments in which you talk to them about faith comfortable as possible. Talk to them about things that maybe they're interested in a little bit more to make it less awkward so that they don't feel like every time they have a conversation it's about something that they're doing wrong or something that's disappointing you. Invest in activities they participate in. Once again, a lot of these kids, it's good to find out why they think that the way that they think. And if you're constantly, or if you're not around them a lot because your work schedule or whatever it is that you do prevents you from being around them, it's good to try to maybe adjust that so that you can be around them a lot more to find out where they are and what they think and how they think. Build trust again. Be patient. Kids like in this situation don't turn around overnight. Most situations. And introduce relevant spiritual discussions to gauge level of interest. It's important because a lot of these kids they probably don't believe, but they don't want to tell you they don't believe. But try to introduce a discussion to see exactly where they are. For example, what did you think about this article I read about the church, or about society, or a government ruling that did this? What do you think about the church that did this? They gave 100 coats to 100 people, for Christmas. What do you think about that? That was, and see what they think. See how they answer. So that can give you an idea of what kind of interest they have spiritually. Find ways to make church life enjoyable and less demanding. They feel like when they come to church oftentimes it's boring, it's not fun, it's not enjoyable, they may feel judged for whatever reason, and you can't change all of that. There are certain things you just can't change. You can try to, as much as you can, make it an enjoyable experience for them so that when they go, they don't have all of those negative stereotypes in their head. So try to make church life less demanding and more enjoyable. And then what not to do. And also expect behavior beyond basic rules and laws of conduct in church, obviously. And then the next one is assume an anti-church stance. Don't assume they're against everything church. Just because they may not necessarily be unsure what they believe, it doesn't mean that they hate church. So don't go, well, why do you hate church? Why don't you like going with us? Well, don't assume that, because there may be some things about church they like. And you don't want to assume that they don't like it. So don't just assume that they're against everything related to church. That's the apathetic kid. Then there's the inquisitive kid, which is the yellow. So these are the question-asking types. The thinkers, the philosophers. Oftentimes they're not as familiar with church boundaries or behaviors. But there's an interest level. They're boundary pushers. They can take discussions off topic. So a lot of times if they're in a discussion, a Bible study discussion, these are the kids that always, well, what do you think about this? How do you know about this? How do you know that this happened? And the evidence seekers. Seeing is believing. These are the kids that, well, how can you prove this? So what about Genesis 1, where how do you know that God created the world? What about evolution? What about the flood? What evidence is there to prove that a flood actually existed? What about Jesus? How do you know the miracles, or this miracle happened, or this miracle happened, or what evidence is there to show that he raised from the dead? They want to, seeing is believing. They ask a lot of those kinds of questions. They want to test stereotypes versus actuality in youth group. They're testers. They want to see if it's real. They want to see if this is legitimate. They've heard some things, but they want to find out for themselves. And they may even seek service opportunities to try to experiment. They'll get involved with it. I want to see what this is about. I want to see if this is what people say it is. I want to find out a little bit more about the youth group, about church. And so how do you approach this kind of kid? Pray, of course. And engagement and care is more important than knowledge. But do show you can wrestle with questions and doubts. And research answers with them. Become apologists. Even though their questions are a lot of times are very, very difficult, research them as much as you can. And don't be afraid to say, I don't know. I don't know is not the worst thing to say. It's worse to pretend you know and give a bad answer than it is to say, I don't know. And say, I don't know, but don't just leave it at I don't know. Just believe. I don't know. Let me research that for you. And then research whatever you can. Christian Apologetics Research Ministry, CARM, is good. Answers in Genesis is good. Those are some ministries that have a lot of answers to those questions. Gotquestions.org, gotquestions.org is good. In terms of websites that have a lot of useful information on those kinds of questions that are really difficult when they start asking those questions. But don't be afraid to say, I don't know, and then go research it and then get back to them and say, well, here's what I found on this question. There's no perfect answer. There were perfect answers to all these questions every kid would believe. But but research the best that you can. And be patient. Just because you answer one question, there'll probably be another question. There'll be another one. And maybe another one. And they may not change overnight, or they may not change before they reach 18 and they leave your house. It may not happen. You have to be patient with them. Here's what not to do. And then again, expect behavior beyond basic rules and laws of conduct in church. Expect them to be respectful, expect them to pay attention. Don't expect them to be disruptive. Don't expect them to lead worship in the teens group. But at the same time, don't try to seek the perfect answer to every question. Research what you can, and then get back to them as quick as you can. You're not going to find a perfect answer. And don't lose patience and stop answering questions. That's huge. Don't be like, look, either you're going to believe or you're not going to believe. Okay? Just believe. Okay? I've answered enough questions, okay? Don't you have enough proof? Don't do that. You don't know at what point they're going to, the light bulb will turn on. It may turn on tomorrow. But if you lose your patience to say, look, you're either going to believe it or not, that could turn them off. Make them go, they don't even know what they believe. They blindly believe everything. Kids are taught to critically think through everything. And it's funny because we teach them critical thinking skills in school. Don't just assume what someone is telling you. Don't just take everything at face value. But when it comes to the Bible, we go, no. Well, you can't have it both ways. There's that saying in English, you can't have your cake and eat it too. How many of you heard of that saying in English? You can't have your cake and eat it too, meaning that you can't have it both ways. You can't say, critically think through everything. And then when it comes to the Bible, say, don't do that for the Bible. Just don't question anything. You can't do that. You have this process could take years. It could take decades. What if they ask all those questions and they end up getting saved at 45? Is it going to be worth it? Yeah. But that's a long time to wrestle with questions and going back and forth, right? But if they get saved at 45, it's definitely worth it, isn't it? So now we're into the discipleship. These are kids that, these are the non-Christians. These are the Christian kids over here. Stagnant. This is the green. They claim Christianity. They claim to be Christian, but they have little knowledge or fruit. They can often confuse family heritage for faith. These are kids that oftentimes I'll ask them a question. I'll say, so tell me about how you came to know the Lord. And they'll say, well, I've always known. So that becomes a red flag. So I'm like, so when you were 6 months old, you knew how to you knew who Jesus was, and you knew about, the spiritual laws. You're telling me that, you were a Christ follower at 6 months old? At what point did you come to know it? They confuse family heritage for faith. They think, my family is Christian, and my family goes to church, therefore I am a Christian, and I'm going to church with them, therefore I'm a Christian. These experiences can often be causing stagnation or questioning and doubt. Sometimes they may have questions and doubts, but oftentimes they can be experiences. They can claim to be a Christian, they can get saved, make a decision for Christ, and then something will happen that will cause them to doubt a little bit. Some kind of experience. A tragedy, an illness, something like that. Multiple identity or the grass is greener in conflict. Here's what I mean by that. These are the kids that being in church and being in youth group is good. When they go to school and they see kids talking about sex and talking about premarital sex and parties and alcohol, that's also good. So they're torn. Because in church they're one person, and then when they go to school they're another. And when they're at home and they're around you, they'll tell you everything that you want to hear. And they may even like it. But then when they go into certain environments, they completely change. And they're like, well, this is also good. So they're caught. That's why they have, let's say, multiple identities. Or grass is greener. It's like the grass is always greener over here. I know I'm here, but this also looks appealing over here. Motives are in question. A lot of times their behavior suggests the primary reason for attendance is something other than growth in Christ. So they'll show up at events, but if you really, if they were in a room where they could answer, I don't know if you know the movie Divergent, or Insurgent, Divergent, but they gave them the truth serum, and they had to tell the truth. If you gave them truth serum, they'll tell you the reason they go to these events is there's girls there, or there's guys there. There's a chance for a mate, or a girlfriend or a boyfriend. Or there's fun things there. If you take those things away, they're not going to go. They can be disinterested, but can know all the answers in discussion. These are kids that, maybe you have a lot of experience in this church, or in churches. Maybe, you have a position where you serve a lot. You're an elder, you're a deacon. And so they know. They can answer any question. They can tell you anything you need to know. But they can be completely disinterested. You can be like, yeah, I believe all that stuff. And then you ask them all the questions, they'll give you all the answers that you want to hear. And they can be interested in serving for reasons like status, or there's girls, there's guys, etc. So, pray. That's how you approach them. Investigate before expecting certain standards of conduct. So if stagnation is no more doubt or experience related, investigate the doubt and experience. If it's green or grass related, then you challenge them gently. Say, well, why exactly is it do you feel that partying is, or the kids who do those things are more, you want to be like them? Why do you want to be like them? Why don't you want to be godly? I challenge them about that. Dialogue with them regarding life choices and consequences. Say, well, if you went down this path, what would happen? Allow them to see the nature and future of their choices. Don't. Challenge without knowing the reasons behind their stagnation. If it's a tragedy or an illness or something like that, then to challenge them as if they're just wanting to stray is not smart, because there may be more legitimate reasons why they feel the way that they do. These are kids that are growing in the blue. So the next two are kids who, they're in it. Growing kids. They have made a decision for Christ. They want to grow and learn. But oftentimes they will have issues they're unaware of. They'll pay attention to sermons. They'll stress the need for growth. But they can have some rough edges. These are kids that a lot of times in your youth group, they'll talk about it. They'll pay attention in the sermon. They'll say, that's great. That has a lot of good stuff in it. And then, they'll drop something on the floor and it'll break, and then they'll let out a curse word. Something like that. The growth can be inconsistent. There can be seasons of growth and then seasons of stagnation. They'll grow, but it won't always be consistent growth. They can be environment sensitive. So a lot of times they'll grow when they're here, and then when they don't, they won't grow as much. So that's why it's important to make sure that these kids stay in some kind of stable church commitment. And that's why you want to gently challenge, be patient with the issues they're unaware of. They may not be, at 14, 15, 16 years old, 12 or 13, they may not be aware of everything. hard to be aware of everything when you're that age. Set up, like I said, a structured accountability structure with a student or counselor. Because a lot of times it's environment sensitive. Make sure that they're in this environment consistently, because that will help them grow. Dialogue with them, about at home. Dialogue with them about God's Word. Be very open about it. Like I said about the consistency, be careful of their extracurricular activities. If there's a sport that's going to take them out of being involved in church for 3 or 4 months, that's not a good idea. Because these students, they're growing when they're here, and then they go to that sport, and then all of a sudden it's like they've regressed. That happens oftentimes. Don't rush the growth. Growth is never simple and easy. It's always a process. Assume the student will grow. Don't assume that they will grow independently without. Don't think, oh, they're a Christian, I don't have to do that much. No, don't assume that. Be very direct in dialoguing with them about their faith. Set up some kind of devotion time at home where you can talk with them regularly about their faith, because they want it. And this is the purple. This is the one that everyone wants to have. Everyone wants to have this kind of student. This is the student who they not only made a decision for Christ, they not only want to grow and learn, but they also want to serve and lead. They demonstrate a relatively high knowledge of the faith. They can also apply it. Share their faith when they can. Their faith is valid anywhere. You'll take them anywhere, and they'll be the kid that wants to follow God. They'll become frustrated if they're not given enough opportunities to lead. They want to be challenged. So you still pray for this child in terms of how to approach. Give them leadership opportunities. Give them service opportunities. This is the kid you want them to say the grace at the family meal, unlike the kid that's in the red or the orange. Challenge and love. Mentor and foster the growth. Again, set up structured learning time at home from God's Word. Challenge them to be other-centered. Challenge them to serve. You want to do that, and especially at home. Set up some kind of structured time where you can go through a Bible study with them at home or something like that. You go through a book, you go through a Bible book, something like that. And don't ignore them and let them on their own. Don't think, oh yeah, they're good. Especially if you have multiple kids, where one may be in the purple and the other one is in the orange. Don't be, well, I need to focus on my time on the kid that's in the orange, because they're good, they're okay. No, don't do that. They both need that attention. This student will become frustrated if you neglect them. They need that structure too. So you need to focus on both of them. Even if you have other students who are more on the outreach side. Because it's very easy to just start paying attention to them. So this is the rainbow spectrum. If you need a translated version, I can try to get that to you as well, but email me and let me know. So this is, you want to take the next week or two or a few days or a few weeks or whatever time you have to really honestly evaluate, where is my teenager in this? Because this will help you start to work with it. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes here going over how you go over kids that are non-Christian, how do you share your faith with them, and then how you disciple kids that are Christian. So, oh, yeah, question?
So how do you evaluate the teenage group?
Oh, how do I evaluate this?
Percentage-wise, do you think our teenagers, what percentage-wise?
Yeah. I think it's a bell-shaped curve. It's not, but you know them better than I do. So it's like, I know them to a degree, but a lot of times you know them better than I do. And I rely on the leaders a lot, because there's a lot of students. So I rely a lot on the leaders. My role has been much more work pouring into the counselors, and the counselors pouring into the students. Although I do know some students where they are. It seems like it's a bell-shaped curve. The bell-shaped curve where it's like there are not that many that are turned off. There's some that are apathetic. They're inquisitive. A number of them are stagnant. And then you have some that are growing and some that are ministry seeking, although the ministry seeking kids are above the, So I think the greatest number of kids are probably stagnant or growing, or inquisitive, apathetic. I hear, a lot of times it's hard to tell from my perspective, and I'm going to get into that more because I don't see a whole lot of them. They don't tell me a whole lot. So I guess, certain students I know, and I can tell they're growing, they're ministry seeking. But some, they look like they are, but I don't necessarily know. But it seems like it's a bell-shaped curve. Yes?
Would you do a survey and let them answer themselves and have a second?
I can do that, but I don't think I'll get the honest answers. They're all going to be growing a ministry. I think, yeah.
I would share that over the past many years, I've listened very carefully to the baptism testimonies from a lot of the teens. And so many of them share over and over again about how they come to teens group and had no desire to be there.
Yeah.
And so many of them even would talk about leadership positions, counselor positions, and still talk about even the Montgomery County face painting or even the drama club, and still have no interest in Christ. They were doing it because of their friends. And then they would talk about a later moment that would, for whatever reason, change. So I would caution that even if your teens are serving as officers, that it's still a worthwhile exercise, because at least from their own mouths, during the baptism testimonies, they would say that I served on the teen council and I still didn't get it. And it wasn't until afterwards that something changed.
Yeah. A lot of times, for one, the kids can change. So they can be, in one part of the spectrum one day, and then 2 weeks from now they could be in another part of the spectrum. And two, I've mistaken them. A lot of kids I thought were growing ended up being apathetic. Or I thought that were stagnant, but they're really turned off. Or they're apathetic. And you learn, the more I learn about the students, the more I begin to learn, okay, well, I thought you were here, but now you're here. If you ask me, it's a bell-shaped curve. But then again, but the students themselves can change. There's certain students, I know they're ministry seeking. And there's certain students, I know they're turned off. Or they're apathetic. But a lot of them, it's hard to tell, because even if I were to do a survey, I would never get an honest answer, because they all want to tell me that they're growing. They all want to tell me they're Christian. They want to tell me that they're growing. They want to tell me, But then situations have to reveal that they aren't what they really are, or they're not as interested as they let you know that they are. So a lot of times it's hard to tell. So there are a number of kids, I think they're growing, but I think I'm probably going to find out in the next few months or a year that they weren't growing. They were letting me know that they were trying to lead me on, because they don't want, and sometimes a lot of kids I thought were apathetic or they were inquisitive. They actually made a decision, but they don't want to tell me they made a decision. So it's hard to gauge, but it's a bell-shaped curve. You have a number, not that many kids are ministry seeking. Most of them are stagnant or inquisitive, or their faith goes and it stops, it goes and it stops, because that's just the way teenagers are. They're phase driven in terms of their life. So, how do you handle this question? So, now a question I want to ask to everybody, and some of the time, hopefully I have enough time we have left, is what are some of the values we want to import on our children from a biblical perspective? What are some of the things that we want them to believe specifically from a spiritual perspective? Spiritual belief. Well, that didn't work. Spiritual. So spiritual beliefs. What do we want them to believe? Well, what are some of the things that we want the perspectives we want them to have spiritually?
We are created.
We are created by God. Okay.
The Bible is the truth, absolute truth.
Bible is truth.
Absolute truth.
Yeah, absolute. All right, what are some others? Perspectives and beliefs that we want them to have.
Rely on God.
Rely on God.
God loves you.
God loves you. Okay, good.
Pray.
Pray.
They are sinners. Everybody is sinner.
Sinner.
Sinners.
We were all sinners.
Jesus is the only Savior.
Jesus is the only Savior. What are some others?
There is only one true God.
Only one true God. That's good. What are some others? What are some other things we want our children to believe? We want them to hold this perspective.
Always love.
Excuse me?
Love.
Love. What about love?
Love your friends.
Oh, love everyone.
Always love.
Wow. What are some others? Any other?
Obey God's command. Obey. Obedient to God.
Oh yeah, obedient to God's commands. Any others? And this is a good list for now that we can go with. I mean, this is not everything, but it's a good enough list. I mean, I'd say created by God, like not evolved. No one mentioned Bible's view of sexuality. I'll probably presume that it is one that you want sexuality and alcohol. So that is probably another one that I presume all you want your children to have the perspective of the Bible when it comes to sexuality. So that's what we want our children to believe. So here's the thing that makes creates a lot of problems. So in the faith worksheet, I was going to also add that for your children, don't assume that because you're in a certain position that your children are in a certain position. You may be in the purple, but they may be in the red. You may be in the purple, they may be in the orange. Don't assume that because you're growing or ministry seeking that they're over here as well. And here's the mistake that a lot of parents make. So faith is seen. Hopefully you can see this. This is how we see evangelism. So your life is like this line, right? This is birth. Oh, I should say this is death. And this is preschool, elementary, middle school, high school, college, career, marriage, kids, retirement. Yeah. So this is how we see evangelism. So if you think, well, I'll number these to make it easier. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we have 11 things. I mean, it's not exhaustive. It's not a complete list, I understand. But these are the 11 things we want our children to believe, right? And we think, this is their life. Well, they need number 1 right around here. Okay? And number 2, well, let's try to get them at least around here. And then, then they get let's just say they tell us, right? Number 4, right around here. I say prayer is essential, I guess. You gotta get number 11 in there. Number 11, I gotta get that around high school, right? So they get number 11 around high school. That's good. One thing. But let's say they get it. They tell us that they believe it. Around 9th grade, which is good. That's good. We're all sinners. Yeah, they get that. Number 6 around middle school. Only one true God. It may take them a little bit of time, but they take a class. And essentials of the faith, and they get it in high school. Obedient to God's commands. Maybe they had a little bit of hard time with that one, but they eventually came to their senses about that one around the junior, senior year of high school. Number 10, rely on God. Had some hard time in college, but they eventually did that. And then some others, Bible is true, absolutely. Yeah, the elementary school, they got that one. So that's good. So parents think of this as like faith evangelism, or faith is like a line. Like this is your life, and these are the points at which you get all these things. So at pre-K they got number 4. At elementary they got created by God. They got the Bible is true, absolute truth. They believe that, around 5th grade, between elementary and middle school. Number 6, this is faith. So that's how a lot of parents see faith. And the same thing about homosexuality. They got that around 10th grade, 11th grade, something like that. So if I can get them to agree to these things, it's almost like it's a checklist. It's like, well, okay, I got number 4, I still got to get number 1, and then I got to get number 2, if I can get number 6, and if I can get them to have number 7, Jesus is only Savior. Okay, well, let's see if we can get that by high school. Okay, they get that by high school, and you think, well, if this is your child, this is pretty good. They got all these things before they left the nest, right? So we're doing okay. And that's how a lot of people see faith. They see it as linear. The problem is, it's not that way. Here's the thing about faith. Faith is more like a cycle than it is like this line. Because what happens when all of a sudden they get here and then number 2 is no longer there. Number 11, no longer there. Number 8, gone. Number 1, that's gone too. All right. So all these things that, wait a minute, you said that you believed all these things, and now all of a sudden here we are at the college and the career, and then all of a sudden these things that were here all of a sudden gone. Wait a minute, I thought that I had instilled this in you. My aunt, my cousin, he was with a girlfriend, and they were dating for a little while, and then she got pregnant. And then so they had to try to have a rushed wedding and everything before the child gets born. And sitting here and listening to my aunt, she says, I taught him that sex before marriage is wrong. And she just went on and on and on. And I taught him that sex before marriage is wrong. Why does he dude, I don't get it, And because maybe faith is not like this line. It's more like a cycle. So let me explain the cycle. These are all C words. This will make it easier for you to understand what even English are C words. Okay, I don't know what they're like in Cantonese or Mandarin, but in English they're C words. Okay. All right, so it's more like this line here. So I'll go over here. So the first part of the cycle is conviction. Not like going to jail, but conviction as in there's a belief, right? So they believe one of these things. They get a conviction that they're created by God. They're not evolved, right? But God created us. He knit us together in our mother's womb, right? And then the next part of the cycle is a challenge. I think they're taught in biology. In public schools, they teach evolution. So all of a sudden, then they're like, well I don't know. I don't know where I should go with that. Or if it's sexuality, then they get to be in high school and middle school, and then they hear a bunch of kids talking about things they did sexually, about how they're with their boyfriend, and it's so wonderful that they had sex with their boyfriend or with their girlfriend. So there's a challenge. Some kind of outside force causes them to rethink all their original conviction. Well, what do I do about this? So the next thing is the challenge. And then after that, the challenge, there's a conflict. Because now I'm like, well, what do I think? My parents taught me this, but they're saying this, and well, they told me that the Bible's true. These people say it doesn't matter if the Bible's true. Well, who do I believe? Where do I go? And then after the conflict is a conclusion. And here's the thing. The conclusion, they'll come to a decision. Say, I'll weigh all the options, and then they'll come to a conclusion. So the conclusion will go to a conviction, but it will go one of 3 ways. It will go to the original conviction, which will come back and say, yeah, all the kids at school, yeah, they talk about their sexual encounters with their boyfriend or their girlfriend, but you know what? The Bible's true. I'm going to save myself for marriage. And then they go back to the original. Or they could go to another conviction, where they say, well, yeah, I know mom and dad taught me this, but the Bible is too limiting. You know, it was a book that was written 2,000 years ago, and they had different rules back then. This is today. You know, and everyone tells me that today it's different. You know? And so it goes to another conviction, and it can also go to a conviction with reservations. Where it's just like, yeah, I know what they say, but there's probably the Bible is a little bit, it can be interpreted a little bit different ways, and, you know, I won't go out and have sex with just anyone, but, you know, when I find a boyfriend or girlfriend, we're going to live together, and we're going to figure out if it's what we want to do, and if not, we get married, we do, and if not, well, we don't, you know. So, the conviction with reservations. But either way, it's a different conviction. And then that conviction will have a challenge. And then it will have a conflict. And then it will have another conclusion, which will go back to that conviction, or that conclusion can go back to this one, which is where they go, they live with a boyfriend, and then they go, well, I don't know if this is right. Well, I don't know if this is really good, and they conflict, and then they go to the conclusion. The conclusion can lead them back to that original conviction, or can lead them back to, well, you know what, maybe what they said was right. Maybe even though I went my own way, maybe what they were saying about the Bible, that probably is better, since, like, I went to live with this guy, and he doesn't want to get married at all. Maybe the reason why he doesn't want to get married is because we're already living together, and he already has everything he wants, so why does he want to get married? Right? So we go back to the original conviction. So it can go any number of ways, but this is the way that faith works, right? So then there's a conviction, and then when they go back to the original conviction, guess what comes after that? Another challenge. And then after that challenge, maybe someone else challenges them with something. Then there's another, and they say, well, okay, you know that what they say about sexuality. Well, yeah, I mean, that's with guys and girls, but you know, there's other ways in which people express their sexuality, like homosexuality. And then there's another conflict, and then there's another conclusion, which comes to another conviction. And it's a cycle, right? So it's not like this line over here, because this is what makes it scary. Because it's a cycle. Because it's never really like set. Because they get a conviction. Yeah, they say, yeah, you know what? I believe that prayer is essential. And then something challenges it. And even though they may get like number 2, Bible is truth and absolute, you got to believe it no matter what. Well, a challenge should come and threaten that. And then, well, I don't know. But then they come back, and then they go, I don't know. And they come back, and they go, I don't know. And they go up, and they go down, and they go up, and they go down a lot of times, depending on who tells them or what influences they have around them that you can't necessarily control. And even if you have the right influences around them, they still, in their mind, are trying to work it out. So this cycle, it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. And that's difficult for a lot of parents to deal with, because it's like, when is it end? Like we think in our minds, I want this to just be solved, so that when they get whatever this is, you know, we think when they get number 3 goes for life. Number 10 goes for life. Number 6 goes for life. Number 4 or number 1, number 2, it goes for life, right? It doesn't work that way. It may go for life. And a lot of times when they go through their cycle, some of them go through the cycle very quickly. If they come up on a challenge, they go through a conflict and conclusion very quickly. But sometimes the challenge can take a long time. There is no timetable on these things. The challenge could take, 6 months. The conflict could take 4 years. And they come to a conclusion. Conflict could take 10 years. It could take 3 months. You don't know. It could take a very long time. So, it's cyclical. And a lot of parents get into thinking that it's linear. It's easier to think that way. Because you think, if I can just get them to agree to these things before they leave home and go to college, then we're okay. And then they go to college, and then they backtrack. And you think, wait a minute, that's not what I taught them to believe. That's not what they said they believed. Because it's a cycle. They ran into a challenge, then they had a conflict, and they came to another conclusion. But it's also encouraging. Because whatever conviction they come to, there's also a challenge and a conflict with that as well. And they may come back to the original conviction. And that's why you stay vigilant in prayer. You stay persistent in prayer. Because you never know where the next conviction is going to come. But if their conviction leads them back to the challenge leads them back to the original conviction, well, don't just sit and be like, okay, we're done. We don't have to deal with that anymore. Well, yeah, you do, because there's another challenge. There's always another challenge that's coming. No matter in the timeline of life, there's always another challenge that's coming. And that's why it's very important to remember that. So how do we know if our teen's faith is authentic? I'll be very quick with this, since we're running short on time. How can you have assurance? Because you're like, well, this is a cycle. How do we know? In 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 3 through 9, I'm going to read this in English. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 through 9. It says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In His great mercy He has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade, kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded through God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief and all kinds of trials. These have come so that your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may be proved genuine and may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed." Did you want to read that? In 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 through 9. Yes. Okay, no problem. Okay. So that was 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 through 9. So what does that tell us about faith? Is the way we know is oftentimes when they go through some kind of trial. That's when you know that your faith, that's what authenticates your faith. That's when you get an understanding. So a lot of times, how do we know when these kids really believe? When they go through some kind of trial. And when they go through that trial, that's when that gives you a clue as to where they really are in terms of their faith. And that is the same way. That's why Peter was talking about how, your faith, your greater worth of gold, proved genuine. So it proves the genuineness. A lot of times you won't know where they really believe until they go to college or they go to high school. I mean, for a lot of these kids, you can think, well, yeah, they're okay. They believe this and they believe that. But a lot of times, for all the kids that are baptism candidates, this is just how I do their interviews, right? First thing I ask them, say, did you talk to your parents about being baptized, or did your parents talk to you about being baptized? If they talk to their parents, it's like, okay, that's pretty good. But if their parents say, my parents talked to me about being baptized, that makes me cautious. I'm like, well, is this your decision or is this their decision? Because if this is their decision, I don't want to do it. You have to decide this. Do you want this? Because I don't want to. Because the last thing I want to do is the parents say you should get baptized because it's Easter Sunday, it's Sunday for Christmas, it's a family occasion. The family's coming in. It's going to be a nice family. It's a nice family event. And then I'm going to baptize you. You're going to say all the things you need to say because your parents are going to feed you all the answers to all the questions. And then we're going to do it. And then 6 months from now, you're going to be doing whatever. There will be no change in your life. Like, this is a change. I asked them another question. I said, when you turn 18, are you still going to be a Christian? When you leave your house, you turn 18, you go to college, are you still going to maintain your faith? And they say, yes. I'm going to hold you to that. Because this is a life commitment. It's not an event where it's a family event. This baptism, no matter what comes your way, this is your decision. So that's, in some ways I try to figure out, but oftentimes the situations we want to avoid are the situations which prove to us that our children are real Christians or not real Christians. When there's some kind of challenge, when there's a temptation, there's a conflict, that's when we really begin to know where our students are in terms of their faith. And a lot of times I've been like, well, wow, or I didn't know that they were asking this question or that question. I didn't, I thought that maybe you're growing, but well, I guess you're not. And then certain situations reveal that to you, and certain things happen. It could be a problem in the family, it could be a problem at home, it could be a problem at school, and then you begin to realize where they really are in terms of their faith. And so don't shy away from those situations because they help us understand where our kids really are. So in terms of I'm just spend the last 2 minutes here on discipleship. So if your kid is a Christian, they're the green, the blue, and purple. If they made a commitment, it's still a cycle. Remember, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be conflicts that will lead to conclusions. But it's important to spend time with them to reinforce what's taught. Reinforce what the church has taught them about faith, about the Bible. And, I mean, Pastor Hugo's wife, Heather, she said that she did a devotion for every single kid in the house growing up. Every single kid, maybe at least 3 or 4 times a week, if not every day. For every single kid. And they have 6 kids. It's a lot of devotions, right? Do every single night. Not saying you have to do that exactly, but when I was at McLean, another family, they found a way with devotions together as a family. They had 3 kids in the youth group. They had 5 kids altogether. 3 of them were in the youth group. So there's a lot of extracurricular activities. There's a lot of sports and a lot of academic type things that they do. There's jobs they have. And they still found a way to have a devotion every single week. They said this time is uninterrupted. It doesn't matter what you do. It's uninterrupted. If you have a test, you have an exam, you have something like that, this will be uninterrupted time in which we will, as a family, come together and have devotions as a family. And are you willing to make that kind of commitment? But it pays off if you do make that kind of commitment. And make sure that you disciple them. Make sure that you train them. These kids, if they're Christians, they really are, then they'll want it. And you can at least talk to them and say, this is what you need in order to grow. If you believe, this is what you need to do. Go through a book. There's a lot of Lifeway, Right Now Media. There's so many different things that you can do. And then just ask this question, in terms of, it's difficult to try to find that time, but just remember this question. Do you want them to go to Harvard, or do you want them to go to heaven? You may not get both. Their first answer is both, all right? You may not get both. If you have to choose, which one would you choose? Do you want them to go to Harvard, or do you want them to go to heaven? And are you willing to do the things that will help them go to heaven? Even if it means it's at the expense of things that will help them get into Harvard. Or a school like Harvard. Maybe not Harvard per se, but a school like Harvard. I did a chart where, what are some of the things your kids do? Extracurricular activities. Instruments. Okay, instruments. What else?
Sports.
Sports. Okay, what else? What do they do outside of art? Okay. Yeah, sports, instruments, art, probably SAT prep classes. Jeans group, yeah.
Chinese school, yeah.
Chinese school. Yeah, put band here. Other school clubs. I mean, there's a lot of things here. So I did a diagram before. I said, if your kid is the maximum, the most involved kid, they do the maximum for all these things, right? When you take away sleep, you take away the time of the school day. You take away, like transportation to school, transportation to and from school. You have, if your child is the most involved in these things, you have about 62 to 63 hours a week with them. The most, like the kids who do the most kind of stuff. You have about 62 to 63 hours per week with your child. All right. Now, you know how often I see them? If they're doing everything, I get about 2 to 3. If they're really involved and they go to every Friday night and they go to every Sunday school, I get 2 to 3. Right? Who do you think will have more influence? For the most involved kid in all these things, and the most involved kid in the church, I get 2 to 3, but you get 62 to 63 hours a week, right? You can find time during those 62 to 63 hours to, I mean, even if it's they're driving them to a band competition, you can have a devotional. You know, there's so many technologies that allow that to happen, you know. And try to find some time to do that. Deuteronomy chapter 11, I'll close with this. Verses 18 through 21. It says, Deuteronomy 11, 18 through 21. Yeah. Fix these words of mine in your hearts and minds. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children may be many in the land of the Lord, land that the Lord swore to give your forefathers, as many as the days the heavens are above the earth. So you're supposed to do it, you know, like tie them on the doorposts, the door frames. Here's a question, a challenge. With your schedule, given all the things that you have to do and your children have to do, your teenagers have to do, what are some things you can do to improve discipleship of your children, to conform them to the image of Christ, given your schedule? Just think about those things. That's your homework assignment for the next week. And then next week, we're going to talk about another topic of interest for a lot of you, which is rebellion. How do you deal with teenage rebellion and conflict in the household? All right, so let's, yes.
I really want to share this because today I'm teaching the middle school boys. 25 kids around. We're studying Matthew's. Jesus said, "All the weary can come to me. I can give you rest." So I asked all the kids the question, "What stressed you out in your life?" Every single one of them are saying grades. So we try to give all these beliefs to our kids, but when the things we want them to do is detached from these beliefs.
Yes.
Because we believe that you have to get ahead, you have to be competitive, you have to. I asked them, why do you care about so much about grades? They're saying, so I can get into good college, so I can get a good job, I can get paid well, I can have a good life.
Yes.
So that's the line of thinking we are, through our action, we're telling our kids, not these beliefs.
Yes.
These beliefs are detached from what we do.
Yes.
Actually, detached from what we do. We are basically telling our kids, material possession is critical to our happiness. So that's, and a lot of kids are saying, I need sleep this morning.
Yes.
I need sleep.
Yeah.
I can't do all these activities.
Yes.
So that's why I want to share this with you. These are 25 kids crying out that B is on, in my mom's eyes, B is bad, A is average.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I asked just a fun question to follow what you're saying. I asked a fun question in the kids. I said, if you had if the Earth rotations changed, so there could be 3 extra hours in a day, what would you do with it? And like 9 minutes. Yeah. So, all right, let's close in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this time together. Thank you for this time, for this class. I pray for these parents that they would learn to parent their kids in a godly way. And I pray that they would follow and reinforce what's been taught in church. And be able to parent them and assess their children and help them move in the direction towards Christ. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
We found the attendance sheet. It's over there. If you haven't signed it, please take it off.
而且 retreat 那个 registration 在这里，没有问题的话可以写作
所以下次去，
他可以找可以小林找你，找你商量那个 break。我觉得呢，我们像那个
我哋邊度查？犀利啊！
我哋都冇仔時間，我哋一齊嚟